Can you hear me? Am I on mute? I bet this is one of the most common things you hear in your Zoom calls since the past year. Isn't it a bummer to keep on speaking and sharing your thoughts only to find out that other people can't hear you? Well, that has been a case for most young people in decision-making spaces. Sometimes they feel small, they do not feel included, or worse, they are muted. Indigenous peoples have proven to be the best guardians of their traditional territories. Given the global challenges that we face today, from climate change to biodiversity loss, the importance of Indigenous land management cannot be stressed enough. Indigenous territories represent over a quarter of the world's land surface. These territories overlap with 40% of all terrestrial protected areas and ecologically intact landscapes. In Latin America alone, more than 80% of the area occupied by indigenous peoples is covered with forest. So, indigenous peoples are really important actors in territorial governance and, by extension, environmental stewardship. Therefore, it's important that the members of these communities feel invested in associated practices and decision-making. That is why my research zooms in on youth as a subgroup often underrepresented in such spaces. Indigenous youth are the future leaders and inheritors of their lands and territories. But are they on board? Are they interested in such a role? Do they feel sufficiently connected to the land and their communities? To answer these questions, I've engaged young people from the indigenous territory of Lamirillo in eastern Bolivia to hear their perspectives and learn from their experiences about being a young person in a remote indigenous community. They've told me what they do, what kind of community activities they are involved in, and if and how they participate in community decision-making. Using Zoom and WhatsApp, we talked about what they observe in these meetings. For instance, if young women are treated differently, they've reflected on what impedes them from participating more actively and what could be done to make their participation more meaningful. I've also reached out to indigenous youth outside of Bolivia, in Australia, the Philippines, Myanmar, Nepal, Mexico, and all the way to Costa Rica. I also asked development practitioners from around the world to gain insights from them about working in the field of youth, gender, and community development. Once I've analyzed these perspectives, I hope to better inform communities, conservation practitioners, and governments about the value of youth participation in Indigenous territorial governance and provide useful recommendations to guide meaningful engagement. As we are at a critical juncture in our fight for humanity's survival, we have to make sure that young people are not muted.